A low, keening wind swept across the endless expanse of sea ice, tearing at the layers of wool and Gore-Tex that protected Dr. Evelyn Fields and her team. The temperature read 32 degrees, but the wind chill drove it far lower, gnawing at exposed skin like tiny shards of ice. Evelyn pressed her back against the broad prow of their snowcat, trying to shelter from the gusts that rattled its steel hull. Her breath emerged in ghostly puffs as she checked her compass, only to find its needle spinning wildly, indecisive. Behind her, Captain Ryan Holt bellowed above the roar, "Stay close! Don't lose sight of each other." But the swirling snow had already erased all landmarks. What had looked 10 minutes ago like a gentle drift now lay beneath a roiling wall of white, and the low sun sank to the horizon in an instant. Dr. Samira Khan, the expedition's medic, fumbled with her radio mic in vain. Static answered her frantic call. "This is Icebreaker Base. No signal." "Repeat, no signal." Alex Petrov, the team's photographer, struggled to point his camera at the storm, partly out of scientific duty, partly because he believed pictures might save their lives. Through his frost-fogged lens, he caught glimpses of skeletal ice floes colliding like titanic whales. Each shutter click was muffled by winds so fierce it took all his strength not to be ripped from his feet. Within 20 minutes, the world had collapsed into a uniform blur of white. The dog team, 6 Siberian Huskies trained for Arctic patrol, cowered against the skirting boards, whining and stamping paws. They strained at their lines, desperate to break free, but Ryan coaxed them with soft words and handfuls of kibble. "Good boys. We'll find shelter soon," he promised, though his voice trembled with doubt. Evelyn consulted her GPS unit. Battery level critical. Satellites lost in the storm's electrical interference. It read only a single waypoint. Their research station, 10 kilometers away. But that station lay directly into the storm's teeth. To the west, the ice shelf dropped into a yawning lead of open water. To the north, fractured floes could split beneath a careless step. They were caught in a labyrinth of treacherous unknowns. With visibility reduced to less than 3 meters, the team huddled behind the overturned runner of the snowcat. Ryan instructed Evelyn and Samira to unpack the emergency shelter, a triangular bivouac tarp rated to 50 degrees, complete with heat-reflective lining. The wind buffeted them as they crawled inside, the tarp flapping like a flag in a gale. Alex and Ryan secured the guy lines around ice anchors drilled into the pack, only to have fresh drifts bury them within minutes. Once inside, they stripped off their outer gloves to light the stove, a small canister heater designed for expeditions like this. The tent's interior warmed instantly as Samira poured hot broth into metal cups, her slender fingers red-raw but steady. "Hydrate," she urged Evelyn, who sipped slowly, savoring the warmth. Outside, the storm raged. Every now and then a deep groan rolled through the ice, as if the Arctic itself protested their intrusion. The team exchanged strained glances. Each knew the protocols. Wait 48 hours, then attempt to retrace your route. But each minute in this howling wasteland felt like an eternity. Evelyn crawled to the tent's entrance and peered into the white hell. The storm's teeth showed no mercy. Her friend's silhouette vanished a heartbeat later, swallowed by the tempest. She bit back a cry and retreated, heart pounding. Back inside, she found Ryan scanning his wrist altimeter, Samira checking pulse rates on the Huskies, and Alex photographing the frost patterns on the tent fabric, proof of the storm's fury. As night fell, the team settled into the cramped bivouac, the stove sputtering against the gale. They shared whispered memories of past expeditions, of sunlit northern lights and wind-softened snowdrifts. Hope against despair. Yet in the howling wind outside lay the grim truth. Until the storm ceased, they were prisoners of the ice, at the mercy of Arctic's fiercest power. And so they waited, each breath a promise to endure, unaware that beyond the swirling veil of white, the great white sentinel of the Arctic stirred and watched. Long before dawn's fragile light could pierce the heart of the storm, Dr. Evelyn Fields became aware of a presence beyond the fluttering canvas of their emergency bivouac. At first it was a faint, rhythmic thump, like distant drums half buried beneath the wind's howl. She leaned forward, cupped her gloved ear against the tent wall, and her heart stuttered with shock. Outside, through the swirling snow, she made out 2 enormous shapes, white forms moving with deliberate slowness, just beyond the rim of visibility. Ryan Holt, his breath steaming in ragged plumes, joined her at the entrance. What? He began, but Evelyn only shook her head, pointing. The shapes resolved into a magnificent polar bear, its thick fur flecked with fresh powder, standing sentinel on the crest of a drifted ridge. Its dark eyes, beneath small, rounded ears, held a calm intelligence as it surveyed the tiny tent pitched against its domain. A second bear, younger and smaller, lingered a few paces behind, nose low and curious, as if the pair had watched the explorers approach and their ensuing panic. Evelyn swallowed, voice tight. A mother and her cub, she whispered. Or an adult and adolescent. They came here on purpose. Through the fabric wall, they watched the bear's silent ritual. The larger bear dipped its head toward the tent, nostrils flaring to capture the scent of human sweat, kerosene, and fear. Then, in a movement so graceful it belied the beast's mass, it turned its great shoulder and ambled a dozen meters eastward, toward a faint cleft in the ice shelf that neither Evelyn nor Ryan had spotted in their frantic flight. The cub paused, looking back at the explorers, then trotted after the adult, their forms swallowed by the whiteout. Inside the shelter, Samira Khan pressed a cold hand to her throat, wide-eyed. They're guiding us, she murmured. Alex Petrov clicked off his camera in awe. Or testing us. Ryan's jaw tightened. Polar bears are dangerous, especially if they think we're an intrusion. He reached for a flare gun strapped to his belt. We can't just follow. We risk provoking them. But Evelyn's pragmatic voice held steady. We have no choice. Without a beacon, without a signal, if we wait, we'll freeze. They know these ice corridors. They've brought us this far. A tense silence followed. Outside, the storm's roar rose, but somewhere beneath it, they heard the crunch of great paws on ice. The adult bear had reached the narrow cleft, a crack in the shelf, leading toward a wind-sculpted canyon. It paused, looked back at the tent, and tilted its head. An unmistakable invitation. Evelyn exhaled. And we go. Now. With faltering haste, they unzipped the bivouac, bundling into heavy parkas as Samira jammed hot packs into their gloves and boots. The huskies, sensing purpose, yipped eagerly, though their wet noses quivered at the scent of polar fur. Ryan clipped the pack's strobe light to his rucksack, an ember of safety against the storm's blank page. Evelyn pressed her palm to the cold canvas where the bear's fur had brushed the tent. She felt a trembling thrill at the contact, as though nature itself had reached in to steady them. Outside, the wind shrieked in their faces, and the snow stampeded across the drifts. But there, through the chaos, they saw the bear's outline again, shoving its massive head through the narrow fissure, the cub slipping in beside it. Courage hammered in Evelyn's chest as they followed in single file, trusting their path to the silent guidance of the Arctic's greatest denizen. The crevasse yawned above them, walls of blue-tinged ice closing in until they formed a tunnel. Each breath echoed against the walls in icy plumes. The storm's fury faded to a muffled hiss, and the path slanted downward on a gentle grade. The bear's tracks, huge paw-shaped impressions rimmed with snow, guided their footsteps, a breadcrumb trail written in the frozen hush. At one point, the fissure narrowed so sharply they had to wedge their shoulders to squeeze through. The cub's nasal snort echoed ahead, as though chiding them for slow progress. And Evelyn laughed, a raw, relieved sound she barely recognized as her own. Once through the bottleneck, they emerged onto a wide plain of smoother ice, where the bears paused. The adults stood tall, scanning the horizon where jagged hummocks of ice formed a distant skyline. Then, as if satisfied, it turned and disappeared into a depression in the ice, the cub loping after it. Behind them lay a yawning chasm of open water, hidden by the storm's veil. Ahead, extending like a ramp into the sky, was a compacted track of wind-polished ice leading toward a distant plateau. At the plateau's edge glimmered the orange glow of navigational flares from their missing snowcat, still intact, still broadcasting a weak signal. Evelyn stepped onto the bear-worn path, tears freezing on her cheeks. They saved us, she breathed. Ryan knelt to scoop a handful of snow and pressed it to his lips, drinking hope. Samira collapsed to her knees, hands clasped in silent gratitude. Alex raised his camera, capturing the view, the stakes they had faced, the path they now trod, and the spectral bear tracks marking their rescue. Long after the bears' silhouettes vanished into the storm's retreat, the explorers stood together, knowing that the Arctic had sent an unexpected guardian. It was no mere chance that a lone sentinel appeared on the ridge. It was a purposeful act of nature's mercy, guiding them away from death's door. And with each cautious step along the ice tunnel, they honored the silent promise of the great white rescuer who had led them forward, one paw print at a time. When Evelyn climbed from the ice fissure, the world had changed once again. The storm's fiercest winds had fled, leaving behind an eerie stillness and a sky streaked with bruised purple light. Before her stretched a broad plain of ice, broken only by a sinuous trail of colossal paw prints, cutting a perfect line toward the distant glow of the flares. Each print was at least twice Evelyn's boot length, the edges crisp where the bear's enormous toes had pressed through the fresh snow to firm ice below. "Look at these," Ryan whispered, bending to touch the snow at the trail's edge. His gloved fingers traced the deep groove where the bear's heel had left a cavernous impression. "He knows this ice better than any of us." Evelyn nodded, steeling herself against a fresh gust that swept across the plain, stirring phantom drifts. She planted her crampon-clad boots in the bear's prints and felt the subtle give of the compacted snow beneath each step, a reassuring firmness that spoke of centuries of migratory routes. Step by careful step, the explorers followed the guide's spoor. Behind them, Samira coaxed the huskies forward, whispering each dog's name: Tuktu, Nanuk, Chimik, their paws pounding the crusted snow with eager determination. Each husky slipped into a print and felt the solid ice below, trusting the bear's path more than their own instincts. Alex's camera raised, clicked away in awed fascination, capturing every shadowed pocket and frost-rimed ridge. Soon, the trail curved along a broad pressure ridge, two slabs of ice thrust vertically by the shifting pack. The ridge rose like a frozen wave, its surface carved into jagged teeth. Evelyn paused at its base, heart thundering. A misstep here could send her tumbling into an unseen chasm. She watched as the bear prints angled diagonally up the slope, each paw print set at a perfect angle to maximize grip. "Follow his line precisely," Evelyn instructed, voice taut. "Keep your weight low." She led the way, sliding a hand along the ridge's rough flank, crampons biting into the steep incline. One by one, the team crept up, each footfall echoing in the hollow hush. At the crest, the view opened onto a shallow lagoon of treacherous slush, half hidden by a thin veneer of new ice. The bear's trail skirted the lagoon's edge, where the ice had grown thick enough to bear massive weight. Ryan tested the ice with an ice axe, hearing a dull thud that promised security. He took the next step, and the trough collapsed into a narrow fissure behind him, just as the bear's print had indicated. Through the bristling fur at the back of Evelyn's neck ran a cold thrill. They would never have guessed the solid path without those guiding prints. On the far side, the explorer's path led into a labyrinth of wind-sculpted hummocks, their ridges sharp as blades. Beyond them lay a field of blue-tinged pressure ridges crowned with snow cornices, overhangs that could shear away under weight. Once more, the bear's paw prints curved around the field, finding a hidden saddle between two hummocks. Evelyn ducked beneath her hood, snow dancing in the low light as she tracked each print. She felt the reassuring rise and fall beneath her feet, a natural blueprint carved by the ursine rescuer. Midway across the hummock field, the seeker's breath caught in her throat at a sudden crack, the sound of ice yielding. But the bear's print lay half a boot length to her right, where the ice stood solid. She sidestepped, heart pounding, and the crack widened behind her, sending a spray of ice crystals skyward. Ryan and Samira followed, eyes wide with gratitude at the silent warning. Behind them, the huskies began to whine softly, sensing the near miss. As they emerged from the hummocks, the northern lights unfurled above in ghostly ribbons of green and violet, casting an ethereal glow across the snow. The bear's tracks led directly beneath the aurora's shimmer, the path now sloping upward toward a cluster of jagged icebergs grounded in the foreshore. Evelyn felt a stirring of hope. Beyond those bergs lay the edge of the ice shelf and the promise of rescue. But first, they faced the final challenge, a shallow channel of open water, too wide to leap and too thinly frozen to walk. The bear's prints ended at the water's edge, then resumed on the far bank, crossing the channel on a hidden ice bridge only inches thick. Evelyn knelt, skimming water into her cup, and let it freeze into a small disk, a test of thickness. The ice clinked like crystal, too fragile for human weight. Ryan examined the bear print's edge. "He knew a plunge pool lies under the ice here," he said. "He's going to cross." Evelyn exhaled. Then, so must we. But carefully. Following the bear's paw print exactly, Evelyn reached the channel's edge and tentatively set her foot on the narrow ice shelf. It groaned but did not crack. She inched forward, each step a measured gamble. The channel's water lapped at the underside of the ice, singing of hidden dangers. But the bear's trail never faltered. Each print fell upon a thicker patch, sculpted by the bear's shifting weight to reinforce the bridge. One by one, the explorers and even the huskies crossed, hands shaking as they reached the far bank. As Samira set paws onto solid ground, she whispered, "Thank you," though no bear was in sight. Ryan patted the final print for luck, and Alex snapped one last photograph of the mirrored paw print, fading already as fresh snow began to settle. Beyond the channel lay the plateau's edge, and there, the orange flares of the snowcat's beacon glowed like a lighthouse in a storm-tossed sea. Evelyn's heart soared as she realized they had followed their Ursine guide through every peril. Pressure ridges, crevasses, slush fields, and ice bridges. The great white rescuer had led them unfailingly, leaving behind footprints of hope on the unforgiving ice. Under the northern light's gentle glow, the team gathered on the ridge. Each placed a gloved hand on the snow, tracing the bear's final print as though in reverent benediction. The huskies danced in joyous circles, their barks echoing across the ice plain. And somewhere, out on the white horizon, the polar bear stood watch, its mission complete, its silent guardianship honored by those few who had glimpsed its guiding heart. As the explorers paused to catch their breath on the ice shelf's far bank, the northern lights above them rippled from green to violet and back again, casting an otherworldly glow over the snow. Behind them lay the perilous channel and the bear's guiding tracks. Ahead, a narrow ridgeline snaked toward a dark cleft in a towering wall of ice. It was here, where the bears had led them, that Evelyn and her companions would find the hidden cache. Ryan Holt was first to break the silence. "This must be where the old team planned their emergency supplies," he said, voice echoing softly in the hollow air. "I remember reading about a buried cache somewhere near here." Samira Khan, shivering despite her thick parka, held up her headlamp and examined the ice wall. Beneath a patch of blue-tinged ice, she spotted a rectangular outline, an unnatural seam in the layers of frozen water. "Over there," she said, pointing. "It looks like they cut a block of ice and slid something behind it." Evelyn shaded her eyes against the swirling colors overhead. "Let's get to work. We need those supplies to make it back to camp." Each step along the ridgeline crunched with hollow echoes. The wind had fallen to a whisper as if honoring the promise of discovery. Alex Petrov moved in the lead, camera swinging, eager to document every moment. He knelt beside the ice seam and ran a gloved finger along its edge. The ice had been chiseled with precision, the lines straight even amid the natural fissures. Ryan knelt beside him, bringing out a compact ice saw from his pack. "Help me support the edges," he asked, nodding toward the seam. Samir and Evelyn braced the ice on either side with their gloved hands to prevent sudden splintering. With careful strokes, Ryan sawed along the seam, the steel blade biting into the ice in rhythmic ticks. Each long pull sent a spray of frost crystals dancing in the lamplight. Beneath the surface, an amber glow began to shimmer, faint at first, then growing warmer. Evelyn felt her pulse quicken. When Ryan finally cut through and pried the ice block free, they revealed a shallow alcove carved into the solid sheet. Inside lay 4 metal trunks, bruised copper cases rimmed with brass clasps, their surfaces etched with the faded insignia of the icebreaker base. Samira hurried forward, gently pulling the first trunk onto a bed of fresh snow. Its lid was padlocked, but Ryan produced a sturdy multi-tool and, with a flick of the blade, snapped the lock open. The hinges protested with a soft creak, then gave way. Evelyn leaned in, breath held, as Samira lifted the lid, and they were greeted by a treasure of orange-capped fuel canisters, space blanket sachets, freeze-dried rations, and a smaller metal box labeled Emergency Medical Supplies. "It's everything we need," Samira whispered, her eyes bright. She withdrew the medical box and gingerly lifted out vials of antibiotics, syringes, sealed ampules of painkillers, and a thermal field dressing still cooled by a built-in ice pack. She held one vial to the lamplight, the liquid inside glowing like amber sunlight. "We're saved," she breathed. Evelyn reached for the next trunk. Inside, she found a cache of spare clothing, insulated gloves, thick wool socks, and a folded nylon bivouac tent, identical to their own but unused. Underneath the garments lay two high-capacity satellite beacons, each capable of transmitting GPS coordinates on multiple channels, and a set of high-frequency batteries still sealed in vacuum packs. Alex stepped forward with his camera, recording every detail as Evelyn carefully extracted one beacon and tested its switch. The device clicked to life, its small LED blinking a steady green. "We can call for extraction," Evelyn said, relief flooding her voice. "Once we set this on the ice." Ryan opened the third trunk, revealing a supply of ice screws, pitons, and lengths of climbing rope, a mountaineer's lifeline. He arranged the gear neatly on the snow, checking each screw's tip and the rope's kern mantle sheath. "These will help us safely descend the ice wall by camp," he noted. Finally, they turned to the fourth trunk. Inside lay a portable water maker, an ingenious desalination pump designed to filter sea ice melt into drinkable water, and a stack of geological survey permits, proving the last expedition's status as scientific rather than commercial. Beneath the paperwork, they discovered a small, leather-bound journal. Captain Holt's predecessor had left notes about the storm's patterns and the furthest safe route across the shelf. Evelyn opened the journal and read a penciled entry. "If anyone finds this, trust the bear's trail. They know ice that no map can show. May this cache save your lives as it did ours." A hush fell over the group. The bitter truth of those words carried weight. Another team had relied on the same Ursine guide and had survived. Evelyn closed the journal gently and passed it around. Then, with practiced efficiency, they packed what they needed into their own rucksacks. 2 beacons, the entire medical kit, half the rations, the portable tent, and Samira's water maker. The rest they resealed in the trunks, locking them with spare zip ties so the bear's cache would remain intact for any future wanderers. Before they left, Alex placed a small wooden carving of a polar bear, hand-whittled from driftwood, inside the alcove, a token of gratitude to their savior. Ryan then repositioned the ice block lid, tapping it back into place with snow-packed edges to blend seamlessly into the glacier's face. As they stepped back onto the ridgeline, the bear's tracks glowed still, imprints of solidarity between species. Samira tested one of the fuel canisters, and a faint hiss escaped as the spout released warmth into the frigid air. Each explorer pocketed a ration bar, savoring the taste of hope after days of freeze-dried monotony. Evelyn took one last look at the ice wall, the hidden alcove now concealed, its contents safe for those who might follow. She felt a swell of gratitude, not only for the polar bear's guidance, but for the foresight of those who had hidden these lifelines beneath the ice. Onward, she thought, toward the beacon's glow and the promise of rescue, carried on the bear's great tracks and fortified by the frozen cache. By the time Evelyn and her team emerged from the ice wall alcove, the sky had darkened again, but this time in a spectacle of shifting emerald and violet. The aurora borealis danced overhead across a field of glittering stars, as if the heavens themselves were cheering their return. The explorers paused atop the plateau's lip, breath misting before them, and allowed themselves a moment of wonder before the final leg of their journey. With the portable beacon activated, Evelyn clipped it to a protruding ice spike. The device's LED pulsed warmly, a bright pulse against the frozen world. "Icebreaker base, this is Team Aurora," she transmitted, voice steady though thick with relief. Her words crackled through the static. A distant but unmistakable voice responded, "Roger that, Aurora. Hang tight. We've got your position. Rescue chopper ETA 40 minutes. The 8 faces around her broke into smiles, beneath frost-lined parkas. They set off again, retracing the bear-worn trail back toward their Snowcat's beacon, the path now illuminated by the glowing northern lights overhead. Ryan led the Huskies, their sled lines taut, while Samira tested the watermaker pump, sending streams of fresh meltwater into insulated bottles. Alex followed, documenting the final impressions of the train and their footsteps within the bear's tracks, a journalistic tribute to their silent rescuer. The journey down the plateau went swiftly beneath the aurora's glow. Where the trail had skirted hidden crevasses, the bear's prints had guided them safely. Where the ice bridge had spanned open water, the team stepped confidently, knowing the path's every kink. Now, with warmth in their packs and the knowledge that rescue was coming, each member felt the weight of the expedition lift. As the Snowcat's flares grew larger in the distance, orange beacons of human refuge, Evelyn's heart hammered with joy. They approached the vehicle but paused when they saw the rescue chopper's spotlight sweep across the plain, its blades carving arcs of wind that sent icy crystals flying. The pilot, clad in red survival gear, hovered low before setting skids gently onto the packed snow. The rotor's thunderous chug echoed against the ice walls as the door opened, revealing rescuers eager and wide-eyed. One by one, the explorers boarded, sharing embraces and slaps on the shoulders. Samira climbed up with the Husky's water and medical gear, while the dogs barked in urgent greetings, tails wagging beneath their frost-crusted fur. Alex climbed aboard last, camera held aloft, capturing the team's triumphant liftoff against the swirl of the northern lights. Evelyn remained on the ice for a final moment. Below her lay the bear's track, a single line of great paw prints leading back into the white wilderness. She knelt, pressing a gloved hand into the snow, imprinting her own paw of gratitude alongside those left by their guide. "Thank you," she whispered into the night, her voice carried away on the wind. As the chopper ascended, leaving the snowcat and its still flaring beacon behind, the team peered out across the frozen landscape one last time. They saw no polar bear silhouette against the drifted ridge, only those delicate tracks fading into the distance. Yet in their hearts, they knew the great white sentinel had vanished, its mission complete. Below them, the endless frozen mosaic stretched southward toward human outposts, hospitals, and warm fires. Above them, the aurora swirled in cosmic ribbons of light, a celestial curtain closing on their Arctic ordeal. And within the cabin's hum, Evelyn felt a surge of awe and humility. They had been lost, they had been dying, but they had been found, guided by the wisdom and silent compassion of a creature born to the ice. As the chopper banked toward civilization, Ryan touched Evelyn's arm and nodded toward her beacon radio. "We're going home," he said, voice brimming with gratitude. Evelyn smiled, eyes shining. "Yes," she replied softly. "Thanks to our polar bear rescuer, we're going home under the northern lights." And with that promise carried on the rotor wash, the Arctic's frozen expanse gave way to distant horizons as the explorers and their loyal huskies soared toward the warmth of rescued lives and the enduring memory of a great white bear's guiding heart. Вы сказали